Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. It's finally time to put some color on the Rock Gobbler project. I'm going to explain to you step by step, completely overwhelming process of painting a vehicle. Hopefully this video either convinces you to pay somebody else to do it or gives you the confidence to give it a shot. But I got something special planned for this. Let's get to it. So you saw in a prior video that I had everything taped off and masked off. There's no real special way to do that. If you're not sure, there's YouTube videos out there, but you're basically just covering everything with plastic. Now, the one tip that I can give you is that you want to make sure your plastic isn't all that loose in the areas where you're going to be spraying. You want it to kind of be pulled tight so that the air pressure of your spray gun doesn't cause the plastic to flap around and move around and potentially get stuck in your paint. You also need to make sure that you use plastic that's meant for painting vehicles. And the reason for that is the plastic will actually, or the paint rather, will actually bond with the plastic a little bit better, because if it doesn't, in the course of your painting the vehicle, you'll wind up getting paint on the plastic, and then little bits of that paint will actually, as it dries, flake off and then land in your wet paint, contaminating it. Now this CJ is already covered in primer. You saw in a prior video that I used a spray gun from Harbor Freight. It turned out pretty good. We're not too worried about any of the little spots in here that are maybe a little bit lighter than some others, or in an area like this where maybe you can see there's a little Sharpie underneath it. The full coverage with primer doesn't really matter as long as the entire vehicle is actually covered in primer, giving the paint something to stick to. Now there's multiple different types of paint to paint your vehicle. They have everything from a single stage to a 2-stage to a 3-stage to candies and pearls and all sorts of crazy things. And I am going with a combination of things. I'm using graffiti paint Rattle cans. The reason I'm doing some graffiti work in here is because I don't want this to look like a typical hot rod show car glossy super nice paint job. I want this to look like it's got some different shades of green in it, and I want this to also look like a cartoon, because let's face it, the entire Jeep basically looks like a cartoon anyway. Now there are other people out there that have done paint jobs kind of like this, but I don't think they've ever really shown you how. So without further ado, let's dive down into why you need to be careful with your paint and watch what you use, and then we're gonna get to laying some down. Now this is a can of the black graffiti paint that I'm going to be applying in certain areas of this rig just to darken it. That way when I lay the base coat over it, it'll make the green all of a sudden look a little bit darker in certain areas where this black was previously applied. Now guys, I'm going to try to get through it quick. If you don't really care and you just want to see the magic, you can skip forward over this little spot of the video here. But for the next minute or so, I'm going to talk to you guys about paint. Because if you're interested in actually painting your car, and it's a vehicle that's going to see sunlight, or you live in the South where the sunlight is a little bit stronger, you're probably going to want to stay away from a single stage paint. Now, I know that's probably disappointing, because if you've been looking into painting your vehicle, single stage paint is by far the most cost-effective way to go to spray something on the vehicle out of a paint gun. The problem with single stage paint is that it doesn't provide a lot of UV durability, right? Ultraviolet light from the sun durability, because the clear coat and the base coat, the color, are actually mixed together, and it just doesn't work all that well to protect the pigment. So planning on having that vehicle out in the sunlight for a few years and still having it look good, it's probably not going to happen. The surface of the paint is also not nearly as durable to scratches and things like that. So depending upon what you're using it for and what you're looking for and how long you want it to last, you probably don't want to go with a single stage. You're going to want to make sure that you buy your paint all from the same company, because there's water-based paints, there's solvent-based paints, there's all different kinds of paints, and you want to make sure that each stage of your process is compatible with what you just put on it. Now I know after I lightly sand this down to about a 900 grit, some people go with a 600. I'm not gonna go that aggressive and scuff this up. I'm gonna spray it, as you'll see here in just a minute. Now the paint I'm using is a solvent-based acrylic, which means my clear coat is compatible with it. But here's the thing that complicates this entire process. I'm using paint markers to turn this rig into the cartoon that it actually looks like. Now, in using paint markers to actually make this thing kind of cool and a little bit different, I have to layer that on basically before I clear it. Let's get to laying some of that spray paint on there, some of that graffiti paint. Let's get this going. Now you're basically gonna have to clean the vehicle several times before it comes to applying paint. You wanna clean it with a rag and a solvent, and you wanna keep doing it until the rag is clean and no dirt comes off. And then you wanna make sure that you apply it in very light coats so that you don't get any runs. All right, so you guys can see that that was basically just completely random, and it basically looks like I just ruined this Jeep by doing that. But by doing that, like I said, when I spray that green over it, the idea is without a super thick coat, the green is going to show, but it's going to be darker in this area, and that's okay because we're going to then come back with more shades of green and basically fade it in. We have my helper over here. The Rattle cans are at a solvent base, and you want to make sure that your first layer is still not off gassing before you start mixing different kinds of paint. So it's real important to make sure 100% that that paint is fully cured, not just dry to the touch, I mean cured, before you wind up actually applying your next paint over it. Now, after we do that, we'll do some other things with some paint markers and other kinds of stuff, but this is now the first step. Mix some different colors together and just kind of fade them in so that we have some different shades of green. It's gonna start to look like something. All right, guys, you saw a little bit of it. I got a green Jeep. It is blotchy. It is a Rattle can spray paint job. It does not look all that good, but it's not done. This is essentially, I don't even know. I keep saying it's step one, but I'm like 8 steps into this thing. So I don't even know what step it is. But at this point, the entire thing is Rattle can green. Let me close the garage for a hot second. I was starting to die in here with the fumes. But basically, you're starting to understand the idea, right? It's green. The entire thing is green. It's starting to look uniform and cool. You can see, hopefully on camera, that there's a couple of lighter streaks in here where I was putting on that brighter green. Now, because we have this base on here, it's basically time to come back. I'm gonna mist on some black in those areas again so I can lightly coat them now, make it look a little darker in those areas. Just kind of go over this with some different shades of green. All right, guys, we're back to that blending, misting cap with the black paint. We're gonna go nice and light over here in the different areas where I want it to be. I'm gonna hold the can pretty far back, and we're just gonna mist it in some areas. Now it's definitely starting to look worse before it looks better, but after this black is applied and cured, I'm gonna go back over it with some of the other green cans, some of the different tips to make it look nice and faded in different areas. And then we're gonna move on. All right, so you can see the grill, some different shades of green and some blacks, you know, faded in there. You can see the body, guys. I mean, this is exactly what I was going for. You can see how it's got a darker green. The brighter green is hidden in there, right? It's got the blacks around it, right? It's perfect. Guys, I mean, it's just starting to look amazing, right? Again, with the transitions in there. Now, I thought I was gonna have to come back and just mist the entire thing with the paint gun to kind of smooth these transitions, but buying these caps really saved me, because this is a cap that's meant to blend different colors of paint together. So it's got like a more concentrated center, which you can see here, and then it mists out on the edges. And that's exactly what it did, right? I mean, everywhere you go, right? I mean, it's darker back here by the weld, and then it kind of fades in as it goes forward. And you guys can see more of the same thing here with the black moving forward, more of the fading. But basically, This came out exactly the way I wanted to. Now it's time to clean it and prep it. Now guys, these lint-free rags are super important to use, and as you can see, this is the rag that I used the last time I wiped it down right before I painted it, and it is still perfectly clean. So we're gonna use it again. We're basically gonna wipe it down and just continue to do it until it's this clean again. Constantly switching to different places on the rag, making sure to not rub the tag across the paint, and just cleaning it up. Now, like we said in the original video when I was first cleaning this, you want to make sure that you wipe it, basically move in the same general direction. See, we already have some of that dust coming off of this, but you want to constantly move in one direction. And the reason you want to do that is because any of the contaminants or anything that might be on the vehicle are all going to be spread across and pulled in the same direction. You don't want to be swirling and moving and basically leaving things behind on the vehicle. It is all cleaned up, and now it is time. I got some paint markers here from Posca. These are water-based paint markers. I'm gonna have to activate it and get some paint down into the tip of this because this is a black marker. Now, what I'm gonna do is kind of freestyle this whole thing. I am basically gonna outline different panels and then put some accent marks in it. I'm gonna start with black. I'm gonna work my way around the Jeep, adding where I think things need to be, stand back, take a look, add some more. And I do have markers with a whole bunch of different tips. This is the biggest one that I think they make. So I'm going to start off with this to put some nice thick lines on it in some places. And then when I'm done with that, we're going to add in some other colors and kind of fade it all in. It was at about this point that I was convinced I completely ruined my awesome green paint job.
12 seconds later.
This is just the start of it. I know it looks kind of cool, but the whole idea here, right? I mean, I am not done. I am just moving around the vehicle with this paint marker, tracing lines, and basically using the body lines of the Jeep to kind of highlight certain things, right? So you can see I went around the hood, and then we started up here and came down, put some accent marks in there, kind of changed some body lines over here. And, you know, and I'm just gonna kind of work my way around to the other side of the hood for now before I start coming back over here and working my way backwards. Now, again, I'm not gonna do an entire area and then move on. I want the whole thing to come together equally. I don't want it to look like I spent more time in one place than another. So I'm just gonna basically continue doing what I do here and just kind of winging it, right? This is the part where you just kind of get a little creative and kind of make it look like a cartoon.
2,000 years later.
So it just looks too good in matte. It just looks too good in matte. I think I'm gonna have to leave it. I think I'm gonna have to get a matte clear and apply that another time. I went back and forth, but I mean, you guys be the judge. You let me know in the comments what you would have liked to have seen, right? The matte clear and basically keeping it the way it is here, or the shiny glossy clear. But guys, here is, I've done some interior stuff. Here's basically the finished result. I mean, check that out, right? We got a little sunlight on it here. You kind of get the idea of the color. There's still a little more detail I got to do, a little more paint work, got to finish things up, do a little touch up. But I mean, check it out. And guys, that dash and that interior, I mean, check it all out, right? I mean, like, obviously we still got to do some gauges in there, right? I mean, there's still things to do in here, right? Shifter boots, but we got the cup holders back there. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. Come around the back, fuel cells up there. It's coming out really freaking killer. There's not a ton left to do, just drive shafts, all the wiring. I got to do brake lines and fuel lines, and I got to do even more wiring, and then when I'm done with that, probably more wiring. Put a tune in it, hopefully the motor starts. Again, doing a paint job like this is cool, and the reason it's cool and fun is because if I was to put a nice shiny crazy paint job on this and you were to walk up, you know, any of these little imperfections in here, when you see this kind of stuff, you know, you would have been like, oh my god, it's a paint job. And maybe it would have looked halfway decent, probably not, because I did it with hardly any experience. But The thing about doing a crazy deep paint job, right, or painting something in a really awesome, dark, nice, deep color is it shows everything. You know, on this, you're able to take the dents and actually make them part of it. You're able to sit there and take any of the imperfections and kind of accentuate them. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it either convinces you to paint your own vehicle or makes you realize how much work is involved so that you don't have to paint your own vehicle. But this is a super fun, super easy paint job. Obviously, it's gonna get a ton of attention. Soon enough, this thing's gonna be out on the trail. Anyway, thanks for the support. Get out there, build something, and while you're at it, you might as well paint it.